to the Friday edition of the CEO series. Very excited because we have a tremendous guest today. First time we've ever had a Mountaineer. Our guest is Saahil Mehta. He's an entrepreneur, author, passionate mountaineer. He has scaled 4 of the tallest mountains in the world. That alone is a unique feat. But he talks through self-limiting mindsets and habits. And our topic is decluttering our lives, reaching personal summits every day. Saahil, welcome. Thank you for being a guest.
Such a pleasure to be here, Ron.
You know, I see your book. I have it here, if you can see that. And we were just talking about Audible edition is coming up sometime soon. It can now be purchased out of possibly Amazon and the other stores. So I want to start off with your book. The title of your book is called Break Free, A Guide to Decluttering Our Lives. And you know, with COVID, we've got 1,001 things going on upstairs. How did that book come to you? How did the title of that book come to you?
You know, I asked myself, Ron, that once I start to declutter the different areas of my life, be it mental, physical, meaning mind, body, relationships, and the material world around me, what is the emotion? What is the feeling? How do I best describe how it is? And immediately the words break free came to me. You know, it's almost like this clutter is holding me down, dragging me, I'm dragging it around everywhere I go, and it's preventing me from reaching greatness. Mm-hmm. So just to be very clear, my definition of clutter is nothing more than shunned confrontations. And I was effectively shunning confrontations in all areas of my life. Okay. You know, now using the analogy of mountaineering, when I'm climbing up a mountain and I'm carrying excess baggage that doesn't serve any purpose, it's going to be harder, it's going to take longer, more energy, and I've reduced my chance of reaching the summit. So the same way, I had to break free from all this clutter that was in my life in order for me to reach my personal summits.
Yeah. So, I love that metaphor because we all have luggage. And when do we let go of that luggage? That's a very powerful metaphor. So once you started figuring out what you were going to do, what are some key insights from the decluttering process? I mean, it's easy to say, well, declutter, we'll just leave the bag here and keep moving on. But can you walk us through some possible steps as to how you were able to do that?
Yeah, the first thing is awareness, because if you don't have awareness, you're not going to be able to identify the clutter in your life. So you could be just, typical day running from one thing to another, just constantly on the move. And you never had that time, or you rarely have the time to pause and just, kind of reflect and go, hey, what keeps cropping up in my life that doesn't serve purpose? Is it a relationship with a colleague or a family member? Is it some health challenge that I'm facing inside my body? Am I thinking too much about certain things and those thoughts just start, won't leave my head? It starts with that awareness. And when you start to realize that, okay, these are the things that are holding me back, then it's about picking the right one to start with. And, I always tell people, don't go after the hardest one first. You want to build up momentum, go for the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. The hardest one first. Was there some type of formula you used to prioritization matrix, or, well, this is more important because this is affecting? How did you force rank that? If I had 10.
So in my case, it was actually the acknowledgement and coming to terms that there was something going on inside my body that didn't make sense to me. I was having these challenges where it wasn't big enough where I had to go see a doctor. And, all the blood tests that I did came out pretty good. Yeah. But it was still enough to kind of be that nagging pain that just, that kept going in and out and it wouldn't disappear. And it got to the stage where I said, this, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And I said, this can't be how life is supposed to be. I should not accept that this is who I am, because
Yeah.
I don't like this. I don't like this feeling of discomfort in my body. And that's when I, made a promise to myself that I'm going to keep peeling away the layers of the onion until I get down to the root cause. No matter how long it takes and how many people I need to consult with, I'm going to keep going. Whereas before that, I was just on the run. I didn't have time for myself. I didn't have time for anything. I was guilty of saying, sorry, I'm too busy. That was kind of my line on pretty much everything.
Yeah. So I do a lot of work in leadership development. That always comes up, the self-awareness of a leader. Are you self-aware? And everybody will say, yeah, I'm self-aware. But if you talk to their people, they're not self-aware. So that's always kind of a come to Jesus meeting when you have these conversations, because sometimes people don't accept it. Did you go through a process? You mentioned awareness. Did you get feedback from work related, from personal relationships, or that wheel around the average individual? Because you mentioned all these things. How did that work?
Sure. So Ron, basically I had two turning points in my life in the spring of 2016. And allow me to elaborate on these 2 points. So the first one was, as I mentioned, something was going on inside of my body, but it wasn't bad enough to that it was where doctors would say, oh my God, something's wrong, you got to do this and that. Yeah. But I became vulnerable that year. I said, let me open up. I mean, if I don't open up and be honest with other people and truthful, and I just pretend that everything's okay, and I'm and try to protect my ego or whatever it was that I was doing, I'm not going to move forward. So I opened up about my health challenges on a trip when I was by the Dead Sea with a couple that I was there with. And they actually shared with me that they had, had similar symptoms, and, their kids had similar symptoms. They're like, you might have some deficiencies in vitamin and minerals, or you might be intolerant to some foods where your body is just rejecting it. And I had never heard of these things, so I'm like, okay. And they put me in touch with the doctor, and lo and behold, I found out that I was highly deficient in 2 vitamins. And I was also eating foods every single day that my body was rejecting, right? So it wasn't an allergy. It was just something that caused, inflammation in my body. But I was not aware, because I just ignored it. And I didn't have time for it, or it wasn't bad enough for me to say, okay, Saahil, take this more seriously. So that was one of the turning points in my life. And the second one, which I would say is, wow, it's probably the most impactful, is I was on a trip with 7 very dear friends of mine, 7 leaders, in fact, 7 leaders they are entrepreneurs, leaders of their own companies. And we were on a trip to Ibiza. And I'm sitting at the gate at Barcelona airport, and I turned to one of the friends and I say, Vinny, how do we make this trip magical? And, we thought about it for a little while, and then we both agreed that we come up with no judgment. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, and it's like this big weight was lifted off my shoulder. I didn't have to pretend to be anyone. I didn't have to impress anyone. I could just be me. Yeah. And the 4 days that we were there, and by the way, all the others agreed to this as well. So the 4 days we were there were euphoric. And just to give you an example, I was at a dinner one evening at a restaurant called Leo, where they have live entertainment while you're dining. And our table happened to be next to the stage, and my seat was literally next to the stage. And during one of the acts, the dancer, she looks at me and she goes, come up. And I love to dance, but the fear of judgment would have made me shrink back in my chair. I would have turned the other way. I would have probably picked up my phone and pretended I was busy. But I said, you know what? No judgment. Let's go for it. And I went up, and it was liberating.
Okay.
And so that was my trip. And as I was coming back to Dubai, I said, I want to share this with my wife. So I started the journal. I started to write down all these thoughts. And that's when I broke down on the aircraft. And I'm thinking to myself, I go, hey, what's going on? You're not the crying type. What's happening here?
Yeah.
But I realized I had lost my own sense of identity. I was wearing so many masks, Ron, that I did not recognize myself anymore. And the mask that was most dominant was the mask of must be seen as Mr. Nice Guy.
I know.
And by being nice to everyone else, I was ignoring myself. And that's where, you know, a lot of clutter was building up in my life. And that's when I said no more. You know, this stops here. I'm going to make myself the number one priority. And I'm going to identify and remove anything that's holding and dragging me down and break free so that I can achieve, you know, and reach those summits that I've always wanted to in my life.
Mm-hmm. You know, that brought back so many memories as you told that story, because I worked for IBM at one time, and I was in sales, and I had a boss that went out on the sales call with me, and I was very stiff and going through the motions the way they taught us in sales school. And he told me at the end of the day, he said, you know, you have a great personality. He said, never be afraid to let your real self come through. And that stayed with me. This was 20 some years ago. And I still remember that today. And I've always tried to be whoever I am, whatever I'm going to say, I'm going to say it. And it is, as you said, you know, very liberating. I mean, in order to do that. But that awareness thing trips a lot of people, because the vulnerability comes in, and you don't want people to realize that maybe you are not what they perceive. How would you coach a client that says, I want to do that, but there's a barrier there?
Yeah, there's a fear of judgment. You know, I'm gonna look weak. You know, maybe they'll think I'm not capable of doing what I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm supposed to be. You know, especially and I say this more for men as well. Like, I'm the man of the house, or you know, it's like all these expectations and all this pressure from everyone around, and that's hard. You know, I mean, you're just being squeezed from everywhere. And how do you expect to operate at your level best if you're constantly thinking about what others think of you?
Yeah. How long was that journey when the metaphor you used was to take off the backpack, and I'm going to kind of put this here, and I'm going to go ahead and do what I'm going to do through all the insights. How long was that journey when you started this process? I say, let's put it this way: from your flight back home to talking to your wife, how long was that journey that you said, I'm decluttered, I'm not free?
Ron, I'm still decluttering. You know, perhaps I've removed some of the real heavy weights, but I'm constantly finding and fine tuning, and I'm realizing you have these little ones, right, that are still holding on. And although I've addressed the big ones, and it feels so much lighter, and I feel that I'm achieving so much more in a shorter time span, I realize that, you know, it's a journey. Yeah. It's you know, when I climb one mountain, it's like, okay, what's next? What's my next summit? You know, and what's holding me back from reaching the next one? Because it's a whole lot harder. You know, it's higher, it's more technical, it's, you know, the weather's more crazy, whatever it is, you know, but it's what is now preventing me from going to the next level. So it's an ongoing journey. But I would say that the first 2 years, I was evolving at a very rapid pace. I mean, people around me couldn't recognize me anymore because I was evolving that fast.
Yeah. I think from COVID, I think a lot of people are going through their backpacks, or whatever metaphor you want to use, luggage is just piling up, you know, and just stressed out, you know, because I have a conversation with people all over the world, and it's always kind of the same conversations that we're talking about now, and this process of kind of letting go. And let me give you my advice I give to them, and you let me know whether I'm on point or whether say you're crazy. I tell them that every person has a certain set of luggage. Your situation is a lot different from someone else's. So the solution is not an overall solution, but we've got to figure out individually what works for us. Now, I say that to say, because I do this walking exercise every morning from 5 a.m. I get up at 4:45 and I walk for 2 hours. But I find that when I go outside and it's dark outside and there's no traffic and there's very few people walking, I can think things through. If I go out at 9 o'clock, like I did this morning, and I said, let me just come back home because I could not go through my normal routine. And because I figured that out. So am I on point in coaching someone? Every situation is different. You got to figure out what works, but you got to keep trying and experimenting.
I love that, Ron. It's so true because as you mentioned, what works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for someone else. But the point is, it's what is the underlying message, right? I mean, I talk about, and I love what you talked about just now, that you go for a 2-hour walk in the mornings, right? That's your morning routine, right? And that's something you do on a regular basis that perhaps that grounds you, that energizes you. There's something that happens during those 2 hours that's allowing you to perform at a better level. And, maybe I'm assuming here, but I can feel it that if you didn't do that 2-hour routine, your day wouldn't be the same. You wouldn't be able to achieve as much, right? So here's the thing, like I have a morning routine as well. And just like you, I'm an early bird. I don't put an alarm, but I wake up anywhere between 4:45 and 5:30, depending on the time I go to bed the night before. And when I do my morning routine, I'm more focused, I'm more productive, and I'm energized. I mean, you could hit me with bad news one after another, but it's going to take a lot to knock me down. Whereas if I don't do my morning routine and you come with something even remotely small, it can knock me down, right? So I tell people, look, this is my morning routine. I'm going to share it with you, but that doesn't mean you have to do the same one. Just do something that works for you, but make sure you do something and do it every single day because that's your energizing routine.
So I came up with this thought process and I said, some mornings you wake up, there's that inner coach that says, come on, you got to get going. Good day. You're gonna think a lot of things. You're gonna declutter. Using your phrase. And then some days I wake up, there's that inner critic said, nah, you can do it 2:00 in the afternoon. You can do it at this time. No, go ahead and lay in the bed. So it's kind of this battle you're going through here mentally. So that's why your book is so important because of the fact that that's the clutter that's there. Am I right in making that assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love what you said because the example I always give people, and I say, listen, I'm going to tell you one big no before the morning routine. Don't hit that button snooze, and like, how can you hit snooze? Imagine that's the first action of the day, and subconsciously you're thinking, I'm a snoozer. And is that how you want to be known for the rest of the day? No, I want to be known as a go-getter. I want to be known as I'm going to kill it today. I'm going to make it happen. So no snoozing,
No
and
snoozing, no snoozing.
We always have those two voices in our head, right? It's and I actually, without going into detail, I share a little story in the book, but you can almost talk about it's, there's a common story that it's a battle between two wolves, and one is the wolf that is, positive and empathetic and love and courage, and the other one is hate and anger and resentment and so forth. And then people often ask me, like, okay, yeah, we all have this. Which wolf wins? And I say, it's the one you feed.
Yeah.
Right? So which one are you feeding? Because if you feed the one and go, yeah, well, I'll just stay in bed today, and I'll do that in an hour or two. And then it's like you said, you go out at 9:00 and there's more people, the cars are honking, and it just doesn't work.
It just doesn't work. There's something about darkness for me. It's something about being outside when it's dark in the morning. And normally when I'm coming back in, the sun is just coming up. So I'm fine with that. But to close that out is that I'm a lot more productive when I do that in the morning than if I did not do it and do it at 2 or 3 o'clock. So cool. You mentioned in your book, the 4 dimensions of life. I know we probably touched on all 4. Can you walk us through, identify those 4 and the importance of each one?
Absolutely. So in the book, I start with the self, right? And in the self, although everything I talk about is related to the mind, but I really give some key techniques that we can apply, which will help us to mentally declutter, right? And then I move on so that's the first. The second dimension is the body, right? And I talk about how, the thing about the body is that it's an amazing machine, right? And I tell people that, listen, just like any machine, the better you take care of it, the better the output, right? So what are you eating? What times are you eating? How are you sleeping? What kind of fitness regime do you have? What are you applying on your body? All these things make a difference. Are you eating your food fast or are you chewing it? Are you drinking lots of carbonated drinks or are you drinking cold water? Are you drinking hot water? All these things have an impact. So, we focus on the body. And once we've done the mind and the body, we move to the external. And the third dimension is people. Now, people... when I say declutter people usually assume that it means to get rid of someone, right? And
yeah, all the problem ones, get away.
Yeah. We all have a few of those in our life. But here's the thing. It's not about getting rid of people, right? Because that's not the solution. It's about how can I neutralize my emotions in front of people that would otherwise just make me cringe or, just get me boiling. Or it could be something that's happened between me and a loved one, a family member, a colleague, a spouse, a child. And, so this has caused clutter between us. And it's how can we remove that clutter so that we can have a stronger relationship once again? So that's on the people. And then we move on to the fourth dimension, which is the material world. My mountain climbing taught me a lot. I remember I used to commonly use, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that. And then I'd be like, no, Saahil, these are all wants. You have everything that you need. You live a life of abundance. Your needs are your necessities, and you have them. So everything else is a want. It's a desire. Call it what it is. And then when I started thinking of something as a desire as opposed to a necessity, I'm like, hey, actually, I don't need this, or I could do without. I don't need 10 pairs of shoes. I'm okay with 3. I don't need 20 shirts. I'm okay with 7. Right. So I just started becoming more conscious. So, I focus on these 4 dimensions of life. And coming back to the mind, Ron, I'd love to share one which I feel is very appropriate for the world we're living in right now, because the world unfortunately has been engulfed with fear. Someone coughs and you think COVID. Someone has a temperature and you think COVID. Oh my God, I got COVID. I'm going to die. I'm going to this, and yes, there's a lot of uncertainty, which is leading to fear. But here's the thing. And I came across this concept and I said, wow, this is mind blowing. And it's this concept that there's absolutely no need to worry in life. Now I had the same look you have on your face right now. Okay?
Yeah, you caught that, right?
And I was thinking, hey, this sounds weird. This sounds strange. This can't be true. And then so here's what I'm going to say. Hear me out. Do you have a situation in life? No. Okay, nothing to worry about. That's the easy one. Do you have a situation in life? Yes. Can you do something about it? No. If there's absolutely nothing you can do that's going to change the outcome of the challenge that you face, then what's the point of worrying about it?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And if you can change the outcome, then get off your backside and put a plan of action in place. So once you've done that, the worrying disappears. And then someone said, hey, Saahil, okay, yeah, I get it. Theoretically, that sounds easy, but my challenges are far more complicated than that. And, that's when my engineering mind kicks in and I say, hey, okay, I got you. Listen to this. Break down whatever you have into mini challenges, right? And don't look at the big thing because it's like, it's too much. I can't handle it. Break it down into chunks, because you can break it down into parts that you can, do something about, and things that you can't. And the things you cannot do anything about, remove them. Immediately the worrying goes down. And the things you can do something about, put a plan of action in place for each one of them. And the worrying goes further down and then gone.
Yeah. That as you walk through that process, I thought of the tool, the decision tree. If you can control it, you control it. If you can't control it, you move on, and that's the end of that.
Yeah.
But this is what I gather from the past year in talking with leaders across the world, is that they still want to hold on to it, regardless of how much you have that conversation around. You really can't control that. So let's see what you can control and do this. So if you think of a kind of a priority matrix, if you had 10 items that you're worrying about, if you take care of the top 3 or 4, maybe the other 6 will fall into place. But I think mindset, but when you were talking through that, I made a distinction between mind, and body, because I'm thinking all of the things you're thinking, that sounds easy, but mentally I can't make that decision to go there. It's kind of the same way you talk to people. You talk with them today, you have a coaching session today, you work on some things, you give some assignments, and you talk with them a week from now, and it's back to the same thing that you've already coached them about.
You know, Ron, look, what I find, and this was with myself, you know, I'm not any different from any of the others that I coach and I work with, is everything that we've been discussing so far is easy to understand, right? I mean, there's nothing that's rocket science where you're like, I need a PhD to understand this, right? No, it's straightforward. It's easy to understand. But, and here's the big but, it's very difficult to implement, right? Because it requires courage. It requires discipline. It requires humility. And that's when people go, ooh, you know, I'm in my comfort zone. I like it here. I don't know if I want to go down that path. And that's where I find that accountability really helps.
Okay.
You know, I mean, there's some people who are really disciplined. They'll write it down. And I find that when you write something down versus keeping it in your mind, you actually make more, successful attempts. But if you tell someone else, especially if you have, you know, we all have ego, right? I mean, it might be some lower than others, but if I tell you, Ron, I'm going to do this by this date, and then you call me up on that date and I haven't done it, I'm going to feel small. I don't want to feel small. I want to feel like I did it. I want to feel like I made it happen. So that's given me additional incentive to do it. So, you know, when I work with people and you know, we do things at a group level with accountability in place, and we see the transformation and the pace of change, unbelievable. But that's because there's accountability in place. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned, I'm kind of I love metaphors, because metaphors can take a complex subject and I can understand it. So I say, can the person at the bottom of the org chart, can they understand it? You mentioned diamond grade clarity. I love that. Walk us through that, what that means.
Well, you know, when people think of a diamond, they think of perfection. They think of, you know, like scintillation. They think of, you know, clear, like crystal clear. You know, there are a lot of different words that come to mind. And so, and a diamond is also, you know, such a rare gem. It's so valuable, right? And it's also the hardest material, one of the hardest materials in the world. I mean, the only thing that can cut a diamond is another diamond, right? So when I talk about diamond level clarity, it's so clear that there's zero blurring involved. You know, I always tell people that when you have a lot of clutter in your life, it's like you're walking around in fog.
Yes.
And once you start removing that clutter, you know, it's all going away. All of a sudden you see everything and you go, my goodness, I've been blind all these years. You know, I can see clearly now. Yeah.
Well, you know, you mentioned diamond grade clarity, and my follow-up to that was, will this help in the decluttering process? You know, so what would be because there's so many people that's impacted by COVID. So, I mean, the clutter is there 1,000%. Everyone I talk to is going through. And, you know, so you're trying to play this role and guide and navigate the question to get them to a point. What would be a process if someone says, you know, I like the idea of cluttering. How can I bring decluttering? How can I bring decluttering into my, say, normal routine? What advice would you give them?
So, Ron, you know, we talked about it earlier, right? You talked about your walk, and I briefly mentioned the morning routine, but I'm a big believer that, and, you know, this is, I share a quote from Henry Ward Beecher, and he said that the first hour is the rudder for the day. Right? So how you spend that first hour is going to have a huge impact on the rest of the day. And I used to be guilty of pressing snooze. I also used to be guilty of picking up this first thing in the morning. I can barely open my eyes, but I grab the phone and I'm squinting. I'm like trying to pull my eyes, I open them and reading messages. But guess what? You sometimes read things you don't like. You read a news story about something terrible that's happened in the world, and often news stories are more negative than positive. You read about a contract that got canceled or a deal that didn't go through, and then I don't know about you, but I'm down, and then I'm not good with people that day. I'm not productive that day, and it takes me many hours to get back up.
Yeah,
and so I tell people, who really want, who want to start on this journey, and I say, listen. A great starting point is start by energizing yourself every morning. Don't snooze. Stay away from media, the phone, the newspaper, TV, all of that stuff until you've energized yourself through whatever morning routine you want to go through. And I'm always happy to share mine because it's worked so well for me. But it's just do that every single day and watch how your day changes. And part of my morning routine, by the way, Ron, because a lot of people think, oh, it's probably just, some breath work and movement and meditation. And I do all that. So I'm not going to discount any of that because I think it's super important. But part of the morning routine is also I note down my top up to 5 priorities of the day.
Okay.
To-do list. Up to 5. Sometimes it's just 1. Sometimes it's 2. But up to 5. No more than 5. And here's the thing. As a mountain climber, when I started the base of the mountain, because I'm living on the mountain for a week, right? And in many of the mountains I've climbed so far, the summit is far away. I'm not thinking, oh my God, I can't get there by the end of this evening. I'm thinking, okay, where do I need to get to today in order to get closer to reaching my summit? And so that's what I write down every single morning, that what steps am I taking? Where do I need to get to today to get closer to my summit? And I do those first.
Okay.
And so every day I feel a sense of achievement.
Okay.
Because I got a little bit higher on the mountain, a little bit higher each day until I get to the summit.
Yeah. Because the flip side of that, if you would have concentrated on the peak and kept concentrating on the peak, and it's a 5-day journey, you're going to be burnt out by the end of, even if you made it.
And Ron, not forget just burning out. The first 4 days were failures. I didn't make it. I got closer, which was an achievement, but from the lens that I was wearing, which was only focusing on the summit, I didn't make it. It was only on the 5th day I made it. So, it's like, let's break it down. Where do I need to get to by the end of day 1? I got there. Let's celebrate.
Okay.
Where do I need to get to by the end of day 2? I got there. Let's celebrate. Every day is a success and a celebration. So when I get to the top, I'm just, overfilled with joy and a sense of achievement every single day versus I failed. Oh, finally I made it.
I can only imagine, because there's a sense of euphoria when I turn the corner and I'm done. It's like 10 minutes. It's like 10, 15 minutes to 7. I said, you did it today. And I feel good about that. And I don't have that feeling when I wake up. I never do not. So I used to always tell my kids, especially my daughter, you never negotiate with the alarm. You just get up. Never negotiate with the alarm because you're not going to win that. But there is a sense of achievement once I turn the corner and I said, wow, I can't believe I've been doing this for X amount of time. And I do that. I want to go back to the 4 dimensions. So when we think of headlines, we think of mind, body, people, material things. And I know at the end of the session, folks, people who are listening, Saahil has some videos that he's going to share with everyone in case you want to get a little deeper into this. So give me a question under mind. If I'm doing kind of a self-evaluation, I put those 4 pillars up. From the mental side, what question would I ask myself? From the body side, what question? From the people side, from the material side? Because when you look at each one of those, you got to diagnose each one of those categories to see where am I? Can you guide us through a simple?
Yeah, look, one of the things that I tell everyone in terms of asking questions is first focus on the mind and ask yourself, where am I today, right? Because it's important to get a snapshot of where you are. And it's, what are the things that I'm worrying about? What does my typical day look like? These are two very good questions that you can already ask yourself, right?
Okay.
Because these are kind of things that are constantly on your mind, or things that you're repeating every single day. And then when you ask yourself these questions, you also want to say, okay, let's fast forward 6 months, and using the present tense, write down how you wish, how your day is looking in those areas. Like, are you still worrying the same amount? Are you still starting your day the same way, or is it different? And then how does that feel? Right? And then when you move on to the body, so the body is, and I'm going to share one statistic. I used to take everything. I used to sacrifice sleep for everything, Ron. Sleep was like the least important thing in my life. Whether it was work or socializing or fitness, I mean, everything took precedent over sleep.
Yeah.
And sleep, I saw a study from the US which said that in the 1940s, the average American slept 7 hours and 20 minutes. And fast forward till today, so 80 years on, it's gone down to 6 hours and 40 minutes.
Wow. I can understand that. Yeah.
But guess what's happening while you're sleeping? Healing. So we're healing less. Now, is that linked to the greater challenges with mental health and physical health that we're seeing in the world? Maybe. So the questions I ask is, do I feel I'm sleeping enough? Do I feel that when I wake up, I feel refreshed?
Yeah. Or tired. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if I'm feeling tired, something ain't right. Okay. And then it's also being more, and it's also being more aware about not just that, but even, am I happy with my eating habits? Right. So these are the two questions I'd ask myself: is that, am I sleeping enough? Am I happy with my eating habits? And you might go, hey, but what about fitness? And I say, if you don't get the sleep and the eating right, the fitness is not going to have a huge impact. Okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of put that third. So that's why I didn't have a question on that. In relationships, I would ask myself, am I accepting of people around me, or am I having issues because of expectations? Am I accepting the people around me, or I'm facing challenges or issues because of expectations? And the second question I'd ask myself is, do I ask enough questions to understand certain situations, or am I just filling in the blanks by assuming? Because I find that a lot of people have challenges in relationships because of assumptions. The way someone said something, the words they used, the way they looked at them. And rather than asking, hey, I didn't quite understand this, can you please clarify? Or keep asking until you're clear, they just filled in the blank.
Yeah. They make the assumptions. Yeah.
And
you're frozen. Yeah. Okay.
So those are two questions that I would ask myself when it comes to people.
Okay.
And when it comes to the material world, the two things I ask myself is, again, it's based on what we said earlier, is, do I have a lot of needs, or or are they really wants?
Wants, yeah.
Okay. And the second question I would ask myself is, if this is not if I have a bunch of things that are not serving much of a purpose in my life, by giving it to someone who's less fortunate than myself, would it better their life?
Yeah.
You know, so it's because sometimes people they can't depart with things, but when they see that it's having a positive impact on someone else's life, all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier to let it go.
Yeah.
Especially when you're hardly using it.
Exactly.
Or not using it at all.
Yeah. So how can organizations play a role in this? Because we know people are, working from home, and maybe the commute hours is not turned into work hours. What was 8 hours could possibly now be 10 hours. I just read tonight that that Google is going to start requiring their people to come back, sometime in the future. Some companies have gone completely opposite of that. What role can organizations play? We probably have the same client base. How do you guide organizations through this reimagining of, I call it the 3 W's: workplace, workforce, and work? How do we?
So, one of the things that I've noticed is that, especially with the working from home, that distance has caused a lot of challenges in relationships between colleagues, right? Because, that when you're just speaking on Zoom, it's perhaps very transactional. You don't have that banter before and after meetings. You're missing out on that. And sometimes, again, you now may be working with, because of cultural challenges, right? I mean, differences, sorry, not challenges. It affects the relationship between you and your colleagues. And that, what makes matters worse is you're working from home. You don't really have a home office. So you got, the kids wanting your time, perhaps your spouse, your parents, or, whoever's living in that house. And sometimes it's difficult to, understand what the working hours are even, because before you was fixed, you went to the office at 9, you left at 5 or 6. Now you wake up and you're on your laptop because someone from across the world needs to get onto a meeting, and then you're working till very late. You have your family complaining that you're not getting enough of their time. So, relationships are really getting affected, right? And you're also spending a lot more time at home. So you weren't used to spending this much time with some of the family members. So I'm finding that relationships are getting affected in a big way. And, Ron, the thing with relationships is, unlike yourself, you can always make excuses when it's something about you, whether it's something it's in your head with yourself, or it's in your body, which is you causing harm to yourself. You can still let that go fairly easily. But when it's other people involved, I see with most people that I work with, they can't get that out of their head. And when you don't address those situations and you let them build up, and you let, as they say, molehills become mountains. It's occupying a lot of space in your head. And then again, you're not being productive. You're losing your temper a lot more, or getting frustrated. And that's affecting productivity. And when productivity is being affected, it's, the organizational chance of success is going down. So I find that relationships in the world we live in right now is so critical.
I was thinking, as you were talking through that, I'm thinking about you, because in the first part of the conversation, you mentioned awareness. So I said self-awareness from leadership development. That's kind of a must-have, post-COVID. And it's easy for us to have a conversation. You've had coaching conversations, and you talk about the self-awareness aspect, and for some reason it just goes over because, I've always said when someone identifies themselves as a leader, you have a problem child, because you don't bestow that on yourself. Your mates or whoever it is around you bestows that. How do you build in self-awareness for people? So I'm talking from the organizational perspective, and for any CEOs or leaders, because a lot of them listen to the program. How do we talk to them about the role they play in employees' well-being? Because your policies that you're creating, or whatever it may be, you have a huge impact on people's lives. not only the 9 to 5 and the deliverables, but beyond that, you have a huge impact. And this is just my interpretation, is that we've got to spend some time up here, and they've got to understand decluttering or whatever process they got to go through, because what they're doing is impacting thousands of people. That's my thought.
Hey, Ron, you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, I always believe that if you can impact the leadership team, it's going to impact the rest of the organization. But, for the leader, this is where it's so important to be, that authentic, empathetic human being, and show vulnerability. Because if you are leading with ego and, people are not going to connect. They're going to feel that you don't understand them. But if you're going to talk about some of your own challenges, how you overcame them, and how it matters to you about the well-being of each and every member in the organization, all of a sudden people are connecting with you and going, hey, he or she understands. And, I want to listen now, right? But it's also asking questions, right? I mean, I find that with leadership is sometimes people are afraid to say things because, they're concerned they might get fired, or they may not get promoted or something. So it's up to the leader to open that door.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And a great concept that I came across is, because if a leader asks for feedback, the problem is that people often don't give it. It's that classic example of when the boss said a joke, everyone was laughing. But when he says the joke at home in front of his friends, nobody laughed. And he's scratching his head going, or her head going, why is no one laughing?
It wasn't funny. It worked in the meeting this morning. You guys not getting it.
Yeah. So it's asking for feed forward, right? It's like, how can I be a better leader? Because sometimes I have to be honest, as a leader, I don't have all the answers. Yeah. So I might come to you, as someone else who's part of the leadership team or working in the management team, and go, hey, how can we do this? How can we improve the well-being of this organization? How can we listen more to the team members? Open that door, show that you're going to listen. But when you do open that door, whatever comes your way, it's not about then trying to up somebody. Because, as a leader, we always have that innate desire to one up everyone because we want to win. Right. But at this time, we just want to say, thank you, thank you. And then, look at how we can implement it. And perhaps bring them in as a accountability member or team member to spearhead the project. So it's all about being more vulnerable. Because if the leadership is not vulnerable, it's not going to help the rest of the organization. And one tool that I find that helps me when it comes to awareness is kind of slowing things down by pausing, right? Because I see a lot of people, they react. And I tell them, I don't want you to react. I want you to respond. And they go, what's the difference? I say, the difference is, and I use this metaphor of the horse rider and the horse. In general, you're the horse rider. You control the horse. You tell the horse, go faster, slow down, jump, go left, go right. But when your emotions start to rise, either positive or negative, you start becoming the horse. And then you're now the wild animal, and you can't really control where you're going to go. And that's usually when you look back and you go, ooh, I wish I didn't say that, or I wish I didn't do that. Yeah. But when you realize that you're transitioning towards the horse, you pause, right? And you just breathe. You just take deep breaths until you become the horse rider again, because that allows you to respond rather than react.
Okay. We've talked about so many things today, and it's just kind of opened up my thought process, because a lot of the things you've discussed, I struggle with when I'm talking to clients. I read an article about a company in India, HCL Technologies. I think the gentleman now, Ram Sharam, I think he's now a professor at Harvard. And one of the things he instituted was all of the 360s performance reviews were posted online. He posted his 360. He posted his evaluation from the board because he wanted full transparency. And when he took over this company, the revenues were down. Every key financial indicator was through the floor. And within a matter of a few years, they were the leaders in the industry as a result of that. Because what we're talking about is building trust with the team so that people feel they don't have to laugh if that joke is not funny, and you're not going to be penalized as a result of that. He talked about his struggles for the prior week, and he gave them kind of a insight as to what he was doing for the next week. And I just always thought that was such a great metaphor for leadership. And then when you look at leadership today, that's a great blueprint for opening that up inside of the organization. In other words, unleashing. You talk about unleashing the horses and kind of guiding it from there.
That's so powerful, Ron. You know, that's so powerful because, you know, one, you've opened the door, right? It's like you said, you're letting people in. You're saying, I can run this, run the ship on my own. I need my team, you know? Yes, I have certain tools and capabilities, and that's why I'm perhaps the CEO or the chairman or whatever it might be, but I'm nothing without all of you, you know? Right. And I'm opening the door for you to speak up. And I'm going to ask at the end of every meeting, I'm going to ask, does anyone have anything else to add? And I'm going to, scan the room, and I'm going to just like kind of make eye contact and make sure that everyone understands that they have the option, right? Because, many cultures, they have this fear that it's a top-down approach. The boss says, I do.
That boss says, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas now the boss is saying, hey, we need to do this, not I. Come on, who's coming up and joining me on this journey, on this ride? Let's go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, when you mentioned the leader asking for help, asking the room for input, and the key to that is having that trust. So if I'm sitting there, I may be a -2, -1, whatever. But I feel comfortable in sharing that because that leader, he or she, has created a trusting environment. So you talk about trusting environment from a leadership team, but you also need trust within the organization so people feel they can speak up, they can say things without being put on some list. So.
Absolutely. And, here's the thing, we talked about the winning attitude. I have my own companies, right? And sometimes somebody will say something, and I in my mind, with my engineering mind, I have a slightly tweaked, better version of it, but I keep my mouth shut because I want them to feel that it's theirs. It's their opinion. It's their idea. Yeah. I want them to take ownership. And, before I used to get calls all the time where, you hear this saying that they throw the monkey on your back, right? It's like, what do I do, boss? We have these two options, and then I'd make the decision. And now I throw the monkey back, and I'm like, look, I trust you. We've hired you for this position. You've done a great job till now, and I'm sure you're going to continue to be doing a great job. How would you do it? And then when they tell me, and even if it's 80% of what I would have thought and done, I say, great idea. Thank you. Let's roll. That's right. And you see the enthusiasm in them because they've taken ownership versus, the boss just said, something on top and now it's his or her idea.
Mm-hmm. I always finish. Sometimes I post quotes on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I say, it's not complicated. And it's not complicated at all. But thank you. Give us the listeners some insights on the offerings you have for your book, for the process we were talking about before we went online.
Absolutely. So, the book is available, not the Audible version yet. That will be in a few months, but the Kindle and, the physical book copy is available on all leading electronic platforms. So you can buy the book there. And for anyone who has enjoyed this, this podcast, I recommend that you go to www.saahilmehta.com. And then if you scroll down, you'll have the option to join the Break Free Foundation course. It's completely complimentary. And what you'll get is a series of 5 videos, which are going to talk about the 5 dimensions of life, plus a bonus one on money. And you'll get them every week for 5-week period, followed by a couple of other goodies. So that's something that you can all, expect and can do after this session.
Okay, great. Sahil, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. It was kind of like I was laying on the couch, the couch metaphor, and because so many things you talked about resonated with me. So thank you so much. And when things calm down here in Dubai, we'll get a chance to go out for dinner and catch up. So thank you so much. Thank you.
I very much look forward to that, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you. Just hold on.